All right, you guys, let's go ahead and get started. Hello and welcome again to my free monthly training, Breaking the Anger Circle. My name is Lori Petro. I am really glad to have you guys here. Thank you for, like I said, stepping out of your day to join me here. I know that you've got a busy things going on. You've got kids, and my goal really is to just give you some tools to walk away with so that you can begin your day from a place of empowerment. A little bit about me, if you've never been with me before. I am a parent educator. I was a teacher in a prior life, and I worked in entertainment production in TV and film in California for many, many years. That was another life. And I have now this life as a parent educator and a teacher of peaceful conflict resolution. And really my goal is not to tell anyone how to parent, but really to show you how to access your own ability to create healthy interactions and healthy relationships within your family. Because that was the thing that I was most lacking as a child. I didn't have really strong relationships. There was a lot of love and good intentions, but there was also a lot of pain and what I, for a long time, was afraid to call abuse. But it was abuse. It was emotional abuse. It was anger used to control other people. It was unrestrained anger, and the effects that it had on my ability to regulate and form healthy relationships and motivate myself was compromised. Nobody did it on purpose. This is really not about blame, but this is about coming back to a heart-centered place of relating to the people in our family, and I think it's something that a lot of us were not given. So if you are here, it's likely that you're here because you want to learn how to deal with the frequent anger that's likely popping up in your home. You know, maybe it's a long pattern that got worse when you had kids, or maybe it's anger that's rising up in you and you didn't even really know it was there, and it's becoming so powerful that it's taken over your parenting or your relationships with your partner, and that's interrupting your ability to tolerate the behaviors of your children, which children are young. There are a lot of behaviors that are difficult to handle. So if we want to temper that monster, we have to embrace it. We have to really know its purpose and know our story, because my path is going to be different from your path, and your path is different from your partner's path, and we're going to do some inner work on that path, but it really requires not looking outside at who can I change, who's interrupting my peace, but how do I reclaim my peace, my inner peace? So if you choose to step on this path to change, which is really just a journey of awareness and acceptance, along with learning some new tools for coping, it's not about erasing the past. You may be shifting some beliefs once you understand some really basic concepts about how our brains learn and how they can secure connections to that long-term learning. But it's really about being okay with where you are, where you're starting in your journey. And self-care is such a huge piece of that. So that's why I congratulate you on taking the time to be here and take care of yourself by learning more. This is a piece of self-care, just educating yourself. To be a conscious parent is much easier overall, but it requires a lot of upfront effort to get yourself in good working order, to be able to withstand what you're required to withstand as a parent, which is a lot of mistakes, a lot of strong emotions from children because they're learning to manage them, they're learning to understand what their emotions are, and mistakes because they need that time. Development takes a lot of time. It needs our patience, and the one thing that we run out of when we let anger take over is patience. And that's because it requires a lot of support to stay on this path. So if you're new to my work, and I see that in the registrations that many of you are, please check out my other introductory trainings that are available on the website, because they're all free and they'll really support you in shifting. Some of the things in this class may bring up more questions, but there are at least 4 other classes that I know that you'll get some of those answers in. So please check out my website if you're new and look there. And I also have a monthly membership program where we meet twice a month in our support circles, and we gather on a call to talk about our current challenges and what's going on. Because when you have support, it's so much easier to stick to a new routine. So I encourage you to find that support in in your life? Where is it? It's not an easy path. To be emotionally responsive to your children can really make some people, especially other people in your family, can really make them uncomfortable. And then things like guilt and shame and blame and judgment, they are so ingrained and so habitual that we've really normalized them. We've normalized those reactions. And to be warm and responsive and loving when someone is acting in ways that aren't acceptable, that has become, not allowed. That's the unacceptable thing, and that we have it backwards. So again, if you're new here, please know that my work is not about telling you what you should do as a parent. It's really about supporting you and what you've been through, and then nudging you to discover, who you really are, who you really want to be as a parent, and what works for you. What do you need in your particular challenges? Because there are no one fix-it, one fits all solutions. It's just not possible. We all come from such different experiences. So check in with those other free webinars, and my membership program even comes with a no-risk 5-day trial for free. So you really have lots of options to support you there. There's lots of ways for us to stay connected, and our next call for our monthly circle is on 4/9. I'd love to see you there if it seems like a right fit, because this month we are focusing on transforming anger, and today we are kicking off that theme with this call. So like I said, if you're just joining us, we are going to go through our presentation slides, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end, and you can participate. I'll put us all into the mode where we can converse, and I can unmute you. You can participate by the phone. If you have to leave, you can just look in your audio pane and see those connections, the dial-in number and the access code. So of course we know that our children, sometimes I think we forget, but we know that our children learn from our model, right? But a lot of the times we think that model is what we're telling them. And you've probably noticed, depending on where you are in your journey, or maybe you're just coming to realize that it's not so much of what we tell them, it's really what we do and what we say and how we act. And they are, a lot of the times they become little mirrors for us. And we hear our own tone come right back at us when they start to talk, and they can start to have a little bit of autonomy and independence, and they want to show that, and then they mirror back to us in those same ways that we speak to them. So children have never been very good at listening to their elders, but they have never failed to imitate them. I love that quote because it's just so true. And that's really because the brain likes patterns. That's how we learn. We're wired to connect and bond to each other and mimic. When you smile at a baby and the baby smiles back, that's the first communication that you have. If a baby smiled and then you made a frown, that would tell a baby a very different message. So it's really about the messages that we're sending that we want to understand. And to understand those messages that we're sending, we have to get control of ourselves. I think that anger is the most challenging aspect of our inner world. And stress coming from our outer world, coupled with that dysregulation that we're often faced with, that frustration, it can build. And the biggest mistake that we make is trying to make anger go away. We try to stomp it out. We try to stuff it down. We're afraid that if we accept it or allow it or let it be seen or felt, that's if we're even aware of what it feels like, we think that it will rule us and expand. So we stomp it out. We're afraid that it'll catch fire and catch on, and then we create the very thing that we're trying to avoid. We create a pattern where it keeps popping up. So the most important thing that if I could choose anything to impart to you today, is that allow emotions to be valid. Young children especially they're really reactive, and that's because of their stage of development. So lots and lots of things trigger their anger, trigger their response to change their situation, to not accept it. This is survival. This is a really good thing. But children will get mad when they think things are unfair, when they think that when they're not getting their way, because they don't have the ability to predict what it's going to be like or that this will change. They're very present moment creatures. And a lot gets them angry. So instead of telling them, we're usually taught that emotion is bad. We're told that kids are unruly, or that they're rude, or that they need to mind their manners. Instead of identifying the key stages of brain development and then understanding that This is a primal feeling that helps us survive. Anger motivates us to change our situation. It's an important part of our regulatory system. And that, knowing that kids make mistakes, again, practice will prompt that development, but yelling impedes it. So when we set up our homes for negativity, when there's a lot of negative stress and tension, then that anger builds. And what becomes this mechanism for survival and an emotion that motivates us to change our situation now becomes a buildup of all kinds of things, unmet needs, maybe needs that we're not even aware of. Fear and stress builds up. Unacknowledged feelings that we stuff down. We say, no, you shouldn't have that feeling. Or we yell at ourselves. When we explode at our kids, then we go back and we rack ourselves with guilt and tell ourselves how awful we are, that self-talk, and we don't acknowledge the real feeling that we were frustrated. We think that if we acknowledge it, that we're allowing our behavior, or if that we allow our kids' feelings, that we're allowing their behavior. But it's different. Feelings are not the same as actions. And then there's lots of blame, shame, judgment, and guilt. So when this all builds up, because we run around putting out those behavioral fires, trying to manage the external so that we don't blow our top, we actually just build up till eventually it does explode. And I can tell you it's really about our perspective, what we see. Anger prompts us to change, but what we're looking at is something else. It tells us, okay, what I'm looking at is what something I don't want. It's something I don't like. But what we're perceiving goes through a few different channels, and sometimes what we're seeing can prompt us to tell all kinds of stories. So, for example, the other morning I found this on my, if you guys are listening to the recording and you don't see the slides, it's a picture of a washcloth and a flattened tube of toothpaste. And I found that on my bathroom sink before my daughter left for school one morning, and I was curious, so I opened up the washcloth, and then I found this, which was all a big pile of goopy toothpaste squirted inside of this washcloth. So in this moment, I was faced with two choices, you guys. I could go ape crazy, blaming her. What were you thinking? How could you? All kinds of things I could have, I just could have gone crazy. I mean, toothpaste, especially that non-chemical-y kind, can really cost a lot, right? So I could have gone to all those places, blaming, shaming, guilting, telling her that she was wrong and unacceptable. And here's the thing, it was wrong and unacceptable, the behavior. And you can imagine the intensity of the feelings that I had, right? So how did I enter this situation and address the behavior, which was unacceptable, without sending the message that she was wrong or bad? And I'm going to share that in just a little bit. But first I want you to know that what I saw, the flattened toothpaste squeezed into the washcloth, that was the observable fact, right? That was what I saw. Toothpaste, flattened washcloth, and the toothpaste inside. Now, whether or not I chose to let my anger or my disappointment cloud my perception and then dictate my actions, it didn't really come from those facts that I was observing. It didn't come from what I was seeing. My perception and my ability to change my perception is dictated by some other things. And the first thing is whether or not my needs were met, my self-care, whether or not I allowed that feeling of frustration without letting it take me over. And that has a lot to that depends a lot on how well my needs are met. Was I prepared to tolerate this? Was I well rested? Had I eaten breakfast? Was I able to deal with that? The next thing that dictates my ability to respond and my perception is my level of tolerance, my mindfulness habits. How good at setting boundaries am I? Am I able to set boundaries without making other people at fault and without feeling bad? Am I able to do it from a place of self-confidence and be mindful about it? Instead of going in with triggered and angry, am I able to regulate that? And then the next thing, the third thing that informs our perceptions, and this is really the most hidden part, is our unconscious memories. That's what's informing these habits of reacting. It's not that you're not trying hard enough. It's not that your kids are not good enough. It's not that they're not learning. It's not that they're not listening. Because like I said, development takes a long time. It's a long phase, childhood. And that prefrontal cortex, which we'll talk about in a minute, that ability to think about our behaviors, that has the longest phase of development. But those unconscious memories, those habits of reacting, were imparted very early on. In the earliest years of growing up, it's about how people reacted to me. And then whether or not I went in and adjusted those reactions. Did I need to work on myself? Our goal here is to increase our tolerance. We want to increase the reaction time from seeing something and then reacting right away without thinking to being able to take the space, to be mindful, to have our brains come online again. Most of us aren't there yet. So anger, it triggers us, right? But it's something that we can use. It first goes through a couple of channels. It goes through our cognition. Am I safe? What is my perspective here? And our part of our brain is triggered. It says, am I safe? Is there a threat? And then there are physiological changes that happen in the body. So what happens to your body? Do you even know what happens to your body? Are you aware of the anger signals? Are you aware that your breath gets really short and it's like you stop breathing almost, or that your face gets flushed, or that you have a lot of nervous energy run to your belly? Do you know what happens to your body when you're triggered into that? That's going, catching those signals is how you're going to be able to stay centered. If you don't catch those signals and you just go with them, they're going to trigger you to need to protect. Whether you're responsive or reactive depends on your perspective, right? It all leads back. It's a big circle. So the anger circle comes in where we have this perception of the incoming stimuli. Whatever we see, we make judgments about it. We go right into emotional memory. What does this experience remind us? We're triggered automatically from the deepest levels of our memory. There are these triggered unconscious memories. Now, it depends on how you grew up. Did you grow up in a home with a lot of anger? Maybe you're really explosive. Maybe you grew up in a home where anger was never shown. It wasn't allowed, so you learned to stuff down emotions, and now you're teaching your kids to just quit it, get over it, you'll be fine. Why are you acting like this? I just gave you this. You're so ungrateful. Right? These are triggered patterns. These are not present moment thoughts. It's a reactive state. It's an emotional hijack that happens in your brain. That's why I'm saying it's not your fault. I don't like blame because blame just doesn't get us anywhere proactive. In order to be able to know that we have the ability to be conscious and make a new choice, we have to know what's happening to us. If we choose to believe that our kids are just behaving because they can be bad, then it really sets us up to not want to help them. We have to understand that the brain goes through a process. When we're triggered, our stress response takes over, and if we go with it and we don't do the mindfulness tools that we're talking about, we go into an emotional hijack, and our emotions hijack our thinking brain. And then, like I said, after we usually feel pain and guilt, and then there we go, embedding more negative memories, more negative feedback loops, more triggered responses, and round we go. So our development can really take a lot of paths. It's nature meets nurture. And then we either wire up for survival or we wire up for potential and possibility. Many of us were not raised with brains that could withstand the demands of parenting. And we say, oh, our parents did it and we got through their anger. Yeah, but you know what? We didn't have a lot of the stress that kids have today. We had more family connections. We had closer bonds. We had parents who worked less. We didn't have as many distractions with video games and media and TV. It's just been increasing and increasing, and our families are being fragmented. And it's not on purpose, but what we were wired for before served us well, but now we need to either, because of the ways that technology is expanding, because of the ways that families are changing, we need to grow. The demands on our brains are more. We could handle it to a certain level. And then all of a sudden we have kids and we have work and we have stress and we have all these responsibilities and we start to crack. And then you see how well we really were wired for survival or potential. This is the pattern that we've set up. Most of us, again, were not raised being wired for potential. So if you resort to your anger often, it's because of early relationships and early feedback from the world, which formed your unconscious memories, those implicit memories, which are driving automatic habits. You know, we learn by creating emotional memories around the things that happen to us again and again. So what patterns were set up? Is your brain really equipped to handle stress without overreacting or retreating, you know, or trying to control others? Every experience that we have and the accompanying feelings and thoughts and sensations and even the muscle actions, that becomes embedded in a network of our brain cells. That's how we learn. Each time you repeat a particular thought or action, you strengthen that connection between a set of neurons, and you make it easier for you each time to access that particular skill. We often ask kids to perform executive level functions like empathy and tolerance, consideration, remembering a task, remembering the sequence. But we do it while stimulating the lower centers of their brain with things like blame and shame and fear and guilt and punishment and our anger. So we're born, if we just go through a quick model of the brain to understand, we're born with our lower brain, and this is just a representation, this is not a true model of the brain, of course, but we're born with the survival center intact. That's our lower brain that handles fight or flight. That's what we have access to. We don't have access to self-regulation, which is located in the higher brain. And then in those first few years, the emotional center is where the primary focus of development is largely focused. And this is where our amygdala is. That's the fear sensor. So everything that comes in is going through this fear sensor, which is learning to expand its tolerance and learning to integrate with the other areas of the brain. But kids are really reactive. Everything that gets filtered in through that emotional center is either perceived as safe or a threat. Well, we know that little kids feel threatened a lot. They feel threatened when it's time to go home, even though they've been at the park for 4 hours. They feel threatened when their friend wants to share their toy because they don't have the ability to perspective take and understand that somebody else has a need. So they get threatened a lot. And we say, we're so used to telling, ourselves or our kids whenever we feel these feelings that aren't right that they're bad or that they have to go away. We have to understand that we really have to embrace this emotional development so that we can prompt the executive center to come online. This is the higher brain. This is where things like being able to plan, predict, empathy, self-regulation, the thinking brain, being able to be reflective rather than reactive, that's a higher brain skill. It doesn't come online until around age 6, and its development spans all the way through early adulthood. So you can understand that these brain patterns, it takes a long time to set up, but every time that we prompt our children to change their behavior, every time we do it with a lower brain center skill like fight or flight, which is what anger, aggression, force, control, every time we use that, we strengthen those areas in their brains. And at the same time, when they react, when they get reactive and their brains get triggered, it triggers our brains just by seeing them react. We have mirror neurons. That's what helps us understand. Well, mirror neurons are really new to our understanding, but we understand now that what we see happening to another person activates the same neural cells in us. So that's why not only do we react together, but we co-regulate together. And it's really important to being able to build positive patterns to learn how to do that. So the brain, like I said, we have these patterns. And if you can think of the brain, everybody close their eyes for a moment. I want you to think of a grassy path, a field of tall grass blowing in the wind. And now I want you to imagine yourself walking over that grass. You're going to walk down all the way to the other side of the field. And as you walk, the grass is slowly being pressed down, down. And maybe then you come back and you walk another path. And again, that grass is slowly being worn down. Now imagine that a small group of people joins you, and everybody starts crossing the path. And everybody walks back and forth and back and forth. And after several hours or even a day on this path right here, which will represent the whole span of development, we have well-worn paths. No longer is the grass scratching at our ankles, or are we trying to find the path. It's worn. And this is how brain development happens. You know, saying once, don't touch that, that's not enough of a path, and it's not enough of a groove in that neural pathway. It needs to happen over and over. It needs to be met with warm emotional help. Now, it doesn't mean that we allow that behavior, right? If a child's hitting, instead of us getting angry that they won't stop, recognize that they need support in doing that. Their stress response is alerted. But I don't want to talk about our kids too much today because I have other webinars on that. I really want to talk about us and our stress response. Because it's the same, whether it's, you know, some of us are learning, some of us have the stress response and the ability to tolerate of, you know, a much younger person. A chronological age is not emotional age. You may see a 12-year-old react like a 5-year-old or a 4-year-old sometimes, or maybe all the time if they were never given that developmental space to learn to regulate their emotions, if emotions were never allowed, if they were always unacceptable. And emotions are sometimes tied in with behaviors. That's the thing. We don't always separate it. So it's not that we're doing it intentionally, but the message that we send to our kids are, you are not acceptable, instead of this behavior is not acceptable. And like I said, the brain is set up for survival and protection. And those patterns of feedback that we set up, think about it. Every time we say things like, stop crying, or it isn't that bad, or you'll be fine, don't make me angry, or if you would simply, then you wouldn't feel, or then this wouldn't happen, or you better not, or else I will. Or we might even be really kind. You know, if you do that one more time, I'm going to get really angry. You know, we might even say it with a very reserved tone, and it doesn't have to be aggressive. How many of you heard those kinds of phrases even growing up? Maybe you say them now, maybe you heard them growing up. It isn't that the intention is wrong. It's just that these phrases, they don't activate the right parts of the brain. We wire kids for survival when we use conditions on our affection and on our attention. And it's really our inability to tolerate our own emotions that lead us to try to convincing other people out of theirs, like stop crying or it isn't that bad. It's really our own inability to not tolerate this emotional place where we find ourselves. And we have to understand the stress response is this physiological reaction that we have to perceived danger or threat. It's just an automatic process that we're born with. So the sensory input comes in, and if we don't think it's safe, we drop down into that lower center of our brain, the fight or flight. And if we do feel safe, we can stay connected to the upstairs. We can insert those mindfulness tools. But really, whether it's a safe or unsafe situation has to do a lot with, again, our perceptions. What do I perceive? What am I really needing? A lot of us are not aware of our own needs, and we start requiring our children to fulfill those needs. I need you to do this so that I can feel better. Instead of, I'm going to take care of myself. I'm going to show you the proper expression of this emotion, and I'm going to give you the skills so that you can meet my expectations. Eventually, you know, with practice, not immediately. And often we don't do that. So the stress response is really, it's a self-protective mechanism. So anger, when it comes up, it's saying, this is unsafe. I feel frustrated. I feel angry. I feel like I don't have the resources to meet my needs in the situation. And then it's really about a perspective shift. It's about a choice at that point. Are we going to be adaptable and flexible so that we can build our resiliency? Or are we going to stay down that other path, the anger path? We have to understand that in order to access the empathy for our children, we have to have it for ourselves. We have to take a step back before we react to what's going on and really get in touch with our inner world. We can reduce the empathy in our kids when we try to convince our kids out of their feelings, or when we get mad when they don't agree with our limits. We're showing them that only our perspective matters, and then if they don't agree that they are potentially unlovable or going to be removed from a situation, and that if they don't see it our way, that there must be something wrong. They need to just accept it or suffer the consequences, which may be my disapproval, my disconnection, maybe taking away something so that they feel pain. All of this reduces empathy in children because they learn to be self-serving and self-protective. We wire them to go downstairs, not upstairs. The same with using anger or threats or intimidation, aggression. If we're using that to control behavior, then we set up a brain that's patterned after fear. And then it may even seek chaos and seek those negative interactions because that's how it feels safe. So a brain that's hijacked by emotions can't handle stress. And then when we can't handle stress, we look to control the outside. That's the way that we try to manage and calm the internal by trying to manage the external. And whenever we do that, we don't teach our kids the skills that they need, and the cycle continues because our kids don't have better skills. Even though we try to prompt them, we think that we're asking them to use their executive functions, cooperation, empathy, but yet we're stimulating the lower centers through fear. And I just told you, through our frustration. It's very scary to children. Our emotions, while we may unload them and then feel better, it leaves a really strong imprint in your children. And the imprint and the message is sometimes it's not what you think. You don't realize that they're getting the message of, you don't love me because you've yelled. Even if you come back and say, well, if you come back and repair, that's one way. But if you sort of go about your day and then just act as if everything's okay and your child then just goes along with that, that doesn't mean that that stored pattern of negativity is not there. It still needs to be processed. So we have to be really aware of when we're using that anger, and sometimes it's going to come up, right? It comes up, but how do we repair? How do we go back? And are we working on limiting that, on trying to get better at being flexible, get better at controlling our impulses? Another way to reduce empathy in kids is to deny the responsibility for your own feelings. You can be really non-aggressive, even passive or silent. You can be silent in taking away your love or your affection when they don't please you. You know, telling kids that they are making you angry, or you're hurting mommy, that's not very nice, that makes mommy sad. You know, we do that if they're being mean. We try to say that as a way to show them that they're hurting someone else. But really what shows them that they're hurting someone else is being honest with them instead of blaming them. Is that when we come at children with an attack of blame or guilt or shame, they shut down. It makes them feel bad. Telling them that they are making you angry or making you sad, it's really a mixed message. I think the message that we really want to share is this behavior is unacceptable and we need to find a new way to do it. But the message that's conveyed is you are responsible for my feelings. And my feelings right now are anger and frustration. That's a really scary thing for a child. And then their behavior escalates with the weight of that, with all of those unrealistic expectations that they cannot manage. It's really scary for a child to feel like they are in control of your emotions. And often we give away our power. Instead of saying, you know, sharing honest emotions is important. You can say, when I see or hear this, I feel angry. Instead of, when you do, you make me. Right? Own it. Don't deny responsibility. Own it. When I see you hit your brother, oh, I feel so frustrated and angry. And I feel like I don't know what to do. Right? Then you own it. And you know what? Your child connects to that. He doesn't want to make mommy feel that way. Instead of saying, you made me do this. It's a really small shift, but it has really big impact. That attack, that blame, that causes kids to feel bad about themselves, and then the reflection stops. We think that they're reflecting about their behavior because we're telling them how they're affecting somebody else with judgment. But this actually leads them to shut down and even resort to that same kind of control of others to change their state. So rather than knowing that other people are not making them angry, yeah, we see things and it may trigger us, but then we have control. We're able to take control. We have a choice. But we teach our kids that they don't have a choice, that they need to make other people change. So it's a message that I think we're unaware of, but we use a lot. And we may create a feeling of duty, a sense of obligation in our children, and they may, yeah, short-term learning happens. They may listen. They don't want to displease you, so they may adapt, but are they positive adaptive strategies or are they maladaptive strategies? Is that fear circuit being stimulated with your interactions? Because that's disempowering for kids. They shut down and they will, again, avoid you or comply to please you and to self-protect. But their empathy circuits are not being engaged. The fear circuit is. And kids who witness your emotional hijack, they're not getting that practice either. Those anger patterns in you lead to an overactive fear response, fear sensor in kids. It interrupts their ability to manage their behaviors in response to what they see and how they feel. So instead of saying things like, I can't believe you did that, what were you thinking? That was incredibly irresponsible, you make me so angry. Which is kind of a lot of the thoughts that went through my head when I saw this on the screen. If you're listening to the recording again, I'm showing the toothpaste squeezed out slide. And in fairness, the end of the toothpaste had broken, so it had squeezed out a little bit on that. But of course, it's still not acceptable, right, to go in and squeeze it out. I couldn't imagine why she had done this. But I decided to go in. I stopped myself. I did some mindful breathing, which we'll talk about in just a few minutes. I did some exercises to regulate my system so that I could connect back to my thinking brain instead of just seeing red and seeing, there's no excuse. This is, crazy. What is that going to serve me if I were to go in and tell her all of those things? She knows that it was wrong. She wouldn't have hid it if she didn't know it was wrong. So I went into her instead and I said simply, I stated what I observed. I was calm and non-reactive. And I stopped the story in my mind, all those assumptions, and I approached her and I said, I see that the toothpaste tube has been squeezed out into a washcloth in the bathroom. We're going to need to clean that up, so I'll get you I'll get you a towel. I forget what I said. I would help her. I'd get something. And I said, I'm not sure what happened, but I'd like you to clean it up. And she stopped. She was sort of about to disagree, and she said, well, I didn't do it, but it melted. Her defense melted as she was saying it. I was so calm and non-reactive that her attempt to deny it just melted right before me. And she said that, and I said, well, I wasn't in the bathroom. You were the only one in the bathroom, and it just appeared, so I'd like you to clean it up. And she said, okay. And I walked away, and I just let that sit in. And when that settled, I came out. We were getting ready for school, and I let her know that she would be responsible for paying for that tube. I didn't do it with shame. It wasn't like, well, now you're going to have to buy us a new tube since you did that. I just said, I wasn't planning on going to the store and buy a new one, but we're going to have to do that. I'd like you to pay for that, and we can get the money out of your bank. It was very non-reactive. It was just, here's what happened. It's not okay. This is the consequence. I'll help you get something to clean it up, and you're going to contribute to buying a new tube. And after I did that, she said, okay, Mommy, and then she jumped on me and squeezed me so tight and said, I was so mad in the bathroom, but I didn't want to squeeze the doggy, so I squeezed the toothpaste instead. And when she said that to me, my heart broke open, because I would have never been privy to that information had I come in and yelled at her or gotten angry and said to her, how dare you waste toothpaste, don't you know, all of that stuff. I would have never gotten to the real motivation, which was I didn't want to squeeze the doggy. I was feeling so angry. And she knows that she goes for things to squeeze because that's my kid's sensory relief. That's her particular style. And she wasn't in a place where she had anything to squeeze, but the dog was with her. She didn't want to squeeze the dog, so she made another choice. It wasn't the best choice, but her honesty in sharing that with me prompted us to practice. Okay, you got so angry. The toothpaste was a better choice, but what could we do next time? Now she was no longer afraid to think about and reflect on the behavior, but I can guarantee you that if she had been treated in the ways that most of you probably grew up being treated, which was with, how dare you do something like that, even if it was calm, it was delivered with, you should be ashamed of yourself, that kind of an attitude, I would have never gotten to the bottom line, and it just would have been a stored emotional pattern. And she would have never gotten practice or the chance to ask for help in a new way. So that was how I handled it, and I could have done it very differently in many other instances, but I chose to take that step back and be mindful, and it served me, and it served me well. And I just read another story online, you guys, and I forget where I read this, but somebody had posted. Let me pull it up. And I don't know if it was in my forum or I saw it on Facebook, but she was saying that she was talking about using this kind of an approach, this mindful approach. And she said, my son was playing in the mud today, and we washed him off mostly outside, but he went into the bathroom sink. It's funny, it was another bathroom episode. And I was tending to his little sister, and when I heard him calling in for help, he had filled the sink all the way to the top and then decided to get in. And it was like a bathtub. The water was spilling everywhere, and instead of getting angry, she didn't yell, she didn't get angry, and he helped her clean it up. And then they had a science lesson about water displacement, and her son offered the most sincere apology that he had ever uttered. And she said it could have turned out very differently. They have played out that alternative ending in previous situations, but that she liked this one so much better because real learning happened, and that's what we all want. When we can learn to calm our responses, then real learning can happen. But you guys, how does real learning happen? How do we really get to that place? We have to know our story. You have to, in order to move from making everything right or wrong, your children are either good or bad, they're right or wrong, in order to move from that to this place of understanding and then supporting their development with the right skills, the right tools, you have to do some internal investigation and make a few conscious choices. But first, how equipped are you to manage your anger? What's your anger story? How were you parented? How did your family express anger? How do you express anger now? Are you aware of the patterns that were stored in you? Again, in my family, there was a lot of anger, so I was very reactive. I was not afraid. There was a lot of yelling. There was a lot of name-calling. And these were patterns that I stored. I had a problem. I used to hit my sisters all the time because I was hit and I was smacked around, and it was very like you didn't know when it was coming kind of thing. You made someone mad and you got a backhand across the face. So I used to hit my sisters well until I was 10, 11, 12, 13. I could not handle that. I couldn't manage myself. I didn't have the impulse control. And I got blamed a lot for it, and I spoke back to my parents all the time. I spoke to them many of the times in the ways that they spoke to me, but it wasn't allowed. It didn't go both ways, right? But we never got to manage the learning part of the connection part because we were all stuck in this anger circle. My parents were stuck in their anger circle from their early patterns and their family, how they expressed anger. It was just being passed down. Now, you might have a family that, like I said, didn't express anger. Maybe emotions, maybe you had a really happy childhood. Everything seemed really happy. Nobody really got angry or talked about emotions. Not necessarily okay either. And again, we have successful lives, right? We have jobs, we have kids, we have friends. We're doing it, we're making it. But how are your addictions to food, to TV? How's your motivation? How is your ability to manage your stress so that you don't need to control other people? There's so many things that we use to soothe that inability to feel okay. And we think that just because it's acceptable to go, have a drink or go do this, that, is it a pattern that's destructive to us? We can express those emotions, those unresolved emotions in lots of ways. Eating a bag of chips doesn't seem like it's that unhealthy. Sitting in front of the TV doesn't seem like it's going to be that unhealthy. But how much are these patterns interrupting your life, interrupting your relationships? Because just because you sit down and eat the bag of chips doesn't mean that you've ever resolved that anger. So even though it doesn't seem ultimately harmful, like maybe a drug addiction or an alcohol addiction, it still affects us. It's still not moving. So you got to know your story. And I'm going to give you guys these exercises and slides so that you can do these. You can write it down right now here if you're on the call, but I'll send you these slides so that you can decide, how did my family express anger? Write it down. Take the time to do this investigation. And some of you may not remember a lot. And that's why I sent you that welcome packet, or the introductory materials about the triggers. Track your triggers. That's the first part of this map to changing things. You want to start knowing what triggers you. Knowing what triggers you might lead you to understanding how your family expressed anger, how you express anger now, some beliefs that they're connected to. Know your story. After you start to get in touch with your story, I want you to really look at your anger. I've had clients who were completely unaware of their anger and their emotional responses. And even when they tried to think about the things that triggered them and feel those, create those sensations, nothing came up. It's like they're numb. So there's a lot of paths that we can do to stomp out the anger, but we really want to invite it in. We want to, if you're not in touch with your anger, rituals for owning your anger are really important. So writing it out and storytelling. What does your anger look like? Is it loud? Is it passive? Get visual about it. And this is where I want you to, write it out. You can write it, draw a picture, drawing art. A lot of people benefit by sketching. I've had people draw pictures of faces, of monsters, of houses that were really old and decrepit. What does your anger monster look like? Is it dripping with sweat, foaming at the mouth? Use colors and textures and sounds to create a picture of what your anger really looks like for you. Maybe your anger is something that you carry. It's real tidy. It's a neat little monster that's carried around in a little box. And that's how you keep it all controlled. Whatever your anger looks like, when you can visualize your anger as a creature, and what does it look like? What does it smell like? How does it talk to you? What hold over you does it have? Invite your anger monster into your consciousness and then draw or write out what you see and what you feel. This is, again, a process. These are not silly processes. This is really ways to get in touch with what's really going on, what's really driving those emotions, and the emotions that you may be unaware of. It's all about invoking the relaxation response, you guys. Reducing aggression, whether it be in us or our kids, is about putting in place practices that will help us grow, help our brains make new connections to positive coping skills. Negative behaviors will diminish the more you take control of your own triggers and your own anger. You will see those negative behaviors in your kids diminish. They won't be as reactive. They'll be able to handle things more. But the problems and the growth challenges, that doesn't go away. Impulse control increases with practice, absolutely, but we grow up and we have challenges, and development is not always a fun, happy thing. Sometimes it's a little bit of struggle. Sometimes it's pain. Sometimes we have to just be okay that our kids are in pain. And if we don't have a really good ability to tolerate emotions and to regulate ourselves, then we're not going to be able to see other people in pain. We're going to want to fix it. We're going to want to change it. We're going to want to advise them, counsel them. What we really need to do is remember empathy and remember, of course, repetition. And we need to validate kids and ourselves in our emotions, especially kids in the early years when the primary focus is on understanding those emotions and the sensations that are happening in the body. We really need to validate those emotions. But like I said, many of us have been trained to deny our emotions. Emotions aren't considered. And then we have this buildup of unprocessed feelings. So when you are, you can tell your kid, you want to give kids the skills. You can say, when you're mad, you can do this. You can't hit, but you can clap your hands. You can squeeze this ball. We need to accept emotions and then teach the positive expression of emotions. I think a lot of the times we want to be perceived by the outside world. Since there's so much judgment, we want to be perceived by others as whole. And we don't want to look fragmented and stressed out and like our kids don't listen. We don't want to put that perception out, that image out to other people. And afraid of that disapproval, we react a lot. We try to control people. We try to control our feelings by making them go away instead of letting them come in, accepting them, acknowledging them, connecting them to what we need, what we believe. Is that true? And what can I do to make an action choice? It's a process. You have to step back. If we're afraid of what other people think, or if we're feeling threatened and we stay there, then we question ourselves and we second guess our decisions. We wonder why our kids aren't just listening to us. So I want us to leave behind those adversarial relationships. It's exhausting for you. And it leaves you feeling worn out and everybody feeling unheard when you try to control your kids by telling them that they need to do this and need to do that. So to reduce that aggression, we've been taught that those emotions, if they are unrestrained and not stopped, that they'll expand, right? But they actually need to be listened to and validated to be processed. Stopping them buries them really deep with feelings of shame and judgment. That's what gets internalized for us, for our kids. And then that increases the negativity. So aggression can come from a few sources. Most common, it's going to come from a feeling of disconnection. And that's where the listening and the validation is key. Not listening so that you can express your very logical or valid rebuttal, but really listening to hear and understand without offering anything else. Just as an example, I was giving a talk to a women's group the other night, and the one woman had a 2-year-old, and at the end of the session we were leaving and saying goodbye, and her 2-year-old, who has just moved from his grandma's house, he's really been saying that a lot. I want to go to grandma's, I want to go to grandma's, and Mom had been talking to me about that in the session, and so when we came out to say goodbye, he actually started saying that, I want to go to grandma's, I want to go, and he's just 2 now, and she says that he has a lot of tantrums when he's told he can't go to grandma's, and she gets very upset. Why doesn't he just listen? I'm telling him we're going on Saturday. Why? And she was such a loving mom, and she really wanted to understand, and you could hear her start to tell him, to be logical with him. Oh, you're going to, we're going to see her soon and all of these things. And he just wasn't having any of it. Our kids, they can argue with the best of us. They'll negotiate us till we're worn down and tired. And he just needed something a little bit different. And so I said to him, you want to go to grandma's, you miss her. And he just looked at me wide-eyed. And he said, yeah, I want to go to grandma's, and he repeated, I can't remember what he said, but he repeated it. And I said, yeah, that would be the most fun if you could see her right now. And I stayed there with him for maybe 20 seconds in that moment. I didn't justify, I didn't say how she was going to see him soon. I just validated his emotion that he was having without trying to convince him of how it would be better later. And within, I'm telling you, 30 seconds, he was okay and off, and he went back to playing. And the coordinator of the evening, she was surprised even, and probably grateful to have that. She said, see what she just did? She just validated. And he recovered, and then he moved on. Now, it's not always going to be that easy. He may have had a tantrum, and I would have just stayed right there with the validation and the tantrum, or I would have, I would have encouraged Mom to do that. And sometimes you don't have to say anything. Once you validate, you just hold them. I hear you. So sad. You stay there. That's what we want when we're angry. We don't want anybody to come in and say, oh, if you just did it this way, or you should have thought about this before you did it, and you would have. No, we don't want that. We want to be validated. So if you want to reduce the aggression in your home, don't allow behaviors, but validate the emotion. You're so angry that your brother touched your project. You wanted privacy. Tell him that you're angry. It's not okay to go into his room and take something else, but it is okay to feel angry. We want to validate that emotion. That will connect us back up, and when kids feel connected, they can go back onto they can connect back up to the thinking brain. We can groove the pathways to the thinking brain to get stronger and stronger every time. The other place I think that aggression can come from is just a temperament, sense of generalized anxiety. Some kids have a lot of stressors, maybe by what's going on in their world. They could have some big changes going on, new babies moving, illness, all kinds of different things. And sometimes that gets stored. And it will come out as aggression because kids don't understand the feelings that are happening. And that's what happens to us. We don't understand the feelings that are happening. They rise up and that we let them take control. But that's when things like roughhousing, setting aside time for physical play, getting out on the jungle gym, running in the park, roughhousing with your kids where you're actually connecting with them in that wrestling physical play is a really great way, and practice, a great way to practice having that play time without getting too physical. And if we see the kids get overexcited, sometimes they get overexcited and they get too aggressive. So instead of saying, I told you, you shouldn't have, okay, you know what? You got a little bit aggressive, overexcited, let's take 5 minutes and we'll practice again. We'll try again. You made a mistake and you try again. This is the message I think we want to impart to our kids. So mindfulness tools. Mindfulness is really about bringing your attention and awareness back to the present moment, or back to whatever your target focal point is if you're doing a mindfulness practice. As your mind wanders, you always want to bring it back to what you are doing. And whether that is breathing, simply breathing to get control of your emotions and to reset your system, or whether it's being really thoughtful and aware in everyday tasks. Mindfulness isn't meditation. It isn't necessarily prayer. It isn't stopping all of your thoughts. You can really notice, when are you mindful in your everyday activities? Some of you may have mindfulness activities that you currently do. And so what practices maybe do you already have in place that are mindful? That's a really great way to see where your starting point is so that you don't feel overwhelmed. Because really, what gets in your way? What keeps you from being mindful? Once you know some of the ways that you are mindful, do you know what prevents you from being more mindful in other situations, from being mindful in your interactions with your kids? It's really important to investigate. So this is another activity sheet that I want you to do. Fill it out. What prevents me from being mindful in my current situation? Take some time and think about this. And then, do you believe mindfulness can really help you? Sometimes we have limiting beliefs about what things can do for us, and then we feel like, oh, well, it's not going to do anything for me. Why should I put the time into it? Or this is silly. This is boring. This feels religious, or this feels silly, or I don't have any time for this. Maybe you forgot, or you can't stay focused. So you really want to start slow. You can practice mindfulness while you're making a cup of tea. Instead of making the tea to drink the tea, make the tea and be present with every step, with choosing your tea bag, pouring the water. And again, if your mind wanders, it's about just breathing in and refocusing your attention on what you're doing. You can be mindful while you're showering. It's not about an empty, non-reactive mind that's void of emotions. It's really about one that is fully engaged and aware and not controlled by shifting emotions, but a mind that uses emotions to guide and expand awareness and our responses. And the benefits are really well documented now, and if anybody wants a resource list, I'll email it to you, or I'll post it with the replay of this. But we know that mindfulness and practicing these tools for mindfulness, these daily activities, it reduces negative patterns in the brain. We rewire the brain. It improves health. Our immune system improves with mindfulness. Mood improves. Your attention improves. Sleep. These are all the things that we want to reduce these are all the things that stress reduces, that we want to increase. We want to improve our health, our mood, our attention, our sleep, and stress, those anger patterns. They reduce our ability to have, to be in a good mood, to respond, to stay healthy. So we have 2 levels of responses that I want us to add our mindfulness to. And this is our tools that we're going to wrap up with before we get to our Q&A, you guys. First, know your story. Know what gets in your way. Know where you're doing your mindfulness already. And then it's time to really put some practices into place. And we have 2 levels of responses. If you watched my recent Teachable Moment, I talked about 2 levels of responses that we have. We have our emergency responses, which are responses right in the moment that we do to calm that anger. What can I do to tolerate this situation, to calm my emotions, to soothe myself in this moment of stress that I'm experiencing right now? That's our emergency response. And then we have our daily practices, those practices that we put in place for long-term change, to create those grooves going deeper and deeper. Mindfulness practice, it's not just about strength of will. It's not just about, oh, I'm going to choose it and I'm going to be able to make that choice every time. No, it's a practice. We got to groove the brain just like we're grooving the brain with our kids. We are forming new connections, and it takes a lot of repetition and practice and commitment. So the key to master and manage your anger is really to stop yourself before reacting. And when you stop yourself, when you're able to make that conscious choice to stop yourself, then you can put some emergency responses in place, like mindful breathing, for one. Mindful breathing exercises is really, you can do a couple of things. You can just do deep, slow breathing, belly breathing, where you breathe all the way down into your diaphragm. Now, making the conscious choice to stop and do this is the hardest part, but every time you do it, it will be easier to stop yourself. So while it may feel really overwhelming at first, please know that every time you take the time to stop and really breathe before you go in and react to a situation, you are preparing yourself to be more mindful and responsive in the future, every time you do that. So you can do this belly breathing all the way down into your diaphragm, or you can do just what we were talking about a minute ago, the relaxation response. Now, the relaxation response was a term coined by a Dr. Herbert Benson, but that's really irrelevant. It's about breathing, and it's about breathing in a specific way. When we inhale, it activates our sympathetic nervous system, right? That will stimulate our fight or flight. And when we exhale, we activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for calming you. That's that rest and reset. So what I want you to do, we can't practice all of these here today because we'd run out of time, but just to run through it really quickly, this breathing is about taking a slow, deep breath in for 4. Breathe in for a count of 4. And then when you breathe out, I want you to breathe out for a count of 8. Now, to slow down your breathing, sometimes you might only be able to breathe out to a count of 5 or 6 in the very beginning because it's difficult to slow down your breathing. But we're going to slow down your breathing twice as long as we're going to inhale. So we're going to activate our relaxation response by doing that. So again, it's just breathing in for 4. Everybody take a really deep breath right now. Just practice that. Breathe in for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then breathe out. Exhale for 8. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Now you may or may not have been able to take that long of an exhale, but the more you do it, the more you will be able to extend your exhale and get really good at slowing down your breathing. This is the first step. You have to slow down your breathing. And then when you get to that point, because this is a choice, guys, remember, it's a choice, it takes practice, but you're changing your physiology, just like that grassy path. Now, when you get to the point of being able to restrain yourself and take that time to breathe, then you can start to engage your thinking brain. Now, there's some other activities you can also do that can be an emergency response. Sensory awareness. Start taking those deep breaths and then bring your attention to something in your environment that is pleasing. Maybe look out a window. Are there flowers? Is there a tree? A picture of someone you love? You want to engage your senses. Sometimes, have you ever been at the beach and your feet are in the sand and you're just twirling, you're just moving your feet in and out of the sand. It feels good, and the sand's going over and between your toes. It's a calming sensory task. It's a mindfulness tool. So that's why a sandbox is a really great thing to have. If you can have one somewhere outside your home, or even a small sensory table with sand inside your home, it's a great thing for kids to help calm them when they're feeling aggressive, playing in sand. That feeling, water play as well. You might splash water on your face to break you out of a really intense feeling. So sensory awareness, these are other tools. Again, these are conscious choices that you have to make. There's no magic fairy. No one's going to come in and say, poof, you're aware again. It's about repetition and really being, making the conscious choice to take time to do these exercises. Physical play is another great one, another great emergency response. When you are angry or when your kids are angry or everybody's really fired up, please don't be afraid to break into play, break into a tickling session, or be silly and goofy to break out of that tension. I think that we're afraid that being playful will give that will tell our kids that we accept their behavior. It's just not true. It really tells kids that this situation is safe, that we got a little bit overstimulated, we got reactive, we got angry, we got aggressive, whatever it is. We're going to take time. I'm coming back. I'm calming down. You're safe, and I'm going to set these limits in a safe way. We interrupt that pattern. We interrupt the anger pattern with play. It provides, again, that safety, and that's really relieving to kids. A lot of the times they get really wound up in our tension. So don't be afraid to play, be physical, be funny, be silly with your kids. When anger grips you, go there. Go to the breathing exercises, to the sensory awareness. It's going to snap your brain out of reactive mode and bring you into reflective mode, so you can choose your response. You can choose to go upstairs to your thinking brain. And the other set of responses that we have are our daily practice responses. These are the most important for the long-term brain restructuring. And whatever your daily practice is, you have to find, everybody responds to something different, so really find what works for you, and then you have to build up to it. And it might be really difficult for you to sit down and meditate for 15 minutes, so don't start there. You can really start with mindful tasks. Just simply, like I talked about, shower with mindfulness, prepare food with mindfulness, by being really just in the present moment and aware of each movement, of each body action, of each thought that comes in. And when thoughts come in, a really great practice to stop any thoughts, whether you're doing a meditation or a mindful practice, a mindful task, is to think of, we have this acronym SOLAR. So when your mind wanders away from cutting your apple, stop, observe the thoughts that have come in, and then let it go. Whatever, don't make any judgments, just allow it and then let it go, and then return. So you want to stop, observe what's come in, what's interrupted, thoughts, feelings, sensation, stimuli from the outside, whatever it is, stop, observe, let it go, and return back to your mindfulness task, whatever it was that you were focusing on. Oops, let me go back to that slide. There we go. So any kind of mindful task, taking the time every day to do something mindful for 10 minutes. Shower. Maybe it's just getting your kids dressed, being really fully present in that moment of dressing them, watching each foot go in, looking at each belt loop that is being tied. This is going to help retrain your brain for slowing down, so that it can, when it's slowed down, you can take the time to respond rather than react. Repetitive activities. This can be anything from painting, sketching, beading, crocheting. Any kind of repetitive activity can really put the mind into a state of calm where intruding thoughts can't get in. Because it's repetitive, it keeps us focused. And again, when those thoughts come in, stop, observe, let it go, and then return back to what you were doing. Don't judge yourself for failing to, stay conscious and aware and mindful for 10 minutes. Just keep practicing. Journaling, creative writing is another outlet. A lot of the times people get benefit by just writing out their story. Like I said, that support is so important. If you don't have the support in people, if you don't have supportive people in your life, sometimes just writing it out can be helpful. It gives voice to your experience without denying it. So journal about your feelings. Allow those feelings. Writing creative stories about your feelings can help process really angry emotions. Just being creative and making up characters, just like when we role play with our children to get to their deep feelings, we can do it with ourselves. Make up stories, make up characters, and have those characters act out those emotions if they feel really upsetting to you, and then find a resolution through the story that you're writing. If you're a creative type, that might work for you. Now, all these things that I'm giving you, it's not to say that you should do all of them. It's find what works for you. Some people are not going to want to sit down, and meditate for 10 minutes, but someone with ADD might find that really difficult to sit down and stop all their thoughts. But they might really benefit from a walking meditation. So getting out in nature and walking, or even just sitting in nature, taking the time to be in nature, has a calming effect on the mind. Setting daily intentions is another mindfulness tool that it sets our day up. I do this with my daughter every morning. We set the intention for the day. What do we want to experience today? And it changes. Sometimes we have goals of being productive or feeling motivated. Sometimes we just want to be happy. Sometimes we just want to have fun. But what it does is we set up the day. We set the intention for the day that we want to have instead of just waiting for the day to happen to us. Because if you wake up and then you just unconsciously go about your day, you'll start reacting to everything that starts getting thrown at you. The world is not, going to stop judging and all of these things. It's not going to stop throwing stressors at us, but we have the ability to manage and to handle it. So setting your daily intention is one way that you can do it, and it's a way that I do it with my daughter to let her know that she has some control over her body, over her experience, over her body, her mind, her emotions, and her experience, and not to rely on other people to change her situation. Another mindfulness tool, and there are many, many others, you guys, like I said, but we can't go on forever because our minds would start to melt. So we can only go through a few. But the last one I want to talk about is doing a body scan, and this is really where you just take some time and feel the tension and, relax. Feel some tension in your body. Where is the tension? And then just send loving, compassionate thoughts to each part of your body. Go through, become aware of your fingers and your fingertips and start there, and then move it up to your knuckles and your palms. And just invite the presence of compassion, love, gratitude into your life, into your awareness, and send that energy, those thoughts, those feelings into each part of your body. This is a way to systematically, again, release tension, have a mindful focal point. It's a way for us to retrain that brain. I really want you to deliberately think about how you can incorporate all of this, because here's the thing, you guys. Oh, EFT, that was another one. And EFT is emotional freedom technique, tapping. It's become really popular. I've been doing it since 2002. 2002 is when I first found out about it, and now it's really exploded into the mainstream, and they're starting to study it. This is one that's not necessarily well researched yet, but it has a lot of benefits, and people have found that it's a really non-invasive way to reduce negative feelings, to reduce addictions, limiting beliefs, all of those things that get in our way. And like I said, I'm not going to go through the exact technique, but I will give you this slide that shows you the opening statement, how you start it, the finger points that you tap, and you can Google. You can just Google this and find it on YouTube, and you'll see lots and lots of examples and lots of people out there with sample phrasing that you can follow along, so you don't have to come up with your own scripts and that sort of thing. But EFT uses the meridian points on the body. It follows, so it's sort of like acupressure or acupuncture. It will follow those points where the needles or the pressure would go. We tap. And this is, again, a process for reducing negative feelings, emotions, beliefs, limiting beliefs that we may have that may stop us from really connecting to that part of ourselves that we want to connect. And you can find out more about that, but EFT is another mindfulness practice that I really recommend. So the path to change. This is my what, when, where worksheet, and again, you will get this. I'll give you a blank one so that you can fill it in, because I want you to fill it in. It's really important that you set up a time and place for doing these mindfulness practices. What you have to choose. First, you have to choose your practice. What works for me? Is it journaling? Is it exercise? Is it prayer? Is it spending time in nature? Is it making time for body care like massage or acupuncture or EFT? Is it the creative arts, painting, singing, sculpting, writing, drawing? What is it that works for you? Is it being out in nature? I want you to fill out this exercise. Choose your mindfulness practice. And again, start small. Don't start with a 10-minute meditation If you have a really overactive mind, if you've got monkey mind, just take a walk in nature. Do that every day for a week and see how much more centered and calm you become. The next step is choose. When will you make time for this daily practice? Don't just think about it and know it in your head. Write this stuff down and return to it. When you fall off of your mindfulness wagon, return to it. You know what? I said that I'm going to get up at 5 a.m. early before my kids, and I'm going to take 10 minutes at that time to do my mindfulness practice. And maybe it's just you're going to mindfully start your day and shower, or maybe you're going to do a meditation, or maybe you're going to take a walk, or maybe you're just going to mindfully feed the dog. Come into awareness. Or maybe you're going to do it at 9:30 after the kids go to school for 20 minutes. You're going to take 20 minutes for the self-care piece. Or maybe you do it at 6:15 at night, in the evenings after your partner comes home, or before dinner, or before, while your kids are taking a bath or doing their homework. You're going to take 15 minutes for yourself. Or maybe you do it at 3 o'clock in the afternoon during a walk. I want you to lay out really specific times of when you're going to take time for this practice. When my students are in a class with me, it's so important that they do these exercises. I don't give these exercises just so you can think about it and know it in your head. I do it so that you can actually walk that path to your change, because your change is not my change. I can't choose a practice for you and tell you when to do it or where to do it, because it's not going to resonate with you. And then where will you do your mindfulness practice? What suits you? Where do you have calming surroundings to look at? It might not be in your office if your office is really cluttered. Maybe it's your bedroom. Is your bedroom a sanctuary? Maybe you hide in the bathroom and you're in the shower, and a bath is where you're going to do it. Maybe you're going to go outdoors. Where are you going to go? Are you going to go to a park? Is your backyard? Do you have a front porch? So the what, when, where worksheet is really important to fill out. And then you might find that, this isn't working for me. This is, okay, I know that I was doing this mindfulness practice, but it's not working for me. Then you can go back and change. Instead of feeling, oh, nothing's working, this isn't, nothing's changing, and then feeling defeated and stopping completely. That's not really where we want to go with that. So I want you to deliberately think about how and when and where you will incorporate this mindfulness into your day. Where can you set aside 10 or 15 minutes with any practice? Again, start where you are. Small changes add up fast. And your level of mindfulness really directly impacts your child's ability to regulate their system, like I said. All right, you guys, that is our presentation. Now I want to get into the question and answer session, because this is where the support comes in. This is where we can walk through some challenges maybe. We can say, hey, I don't understand some things, or this is what I'm working on. Where should I start? Or whatever. We can even walk through some examples of helping your kids with aggression if you'd like. So right now, let's see. I'm going to go into the questions pane and see if anybody sent in any questions. And if you have a question and you want to participate, you can go ahead and raise your hand and I can unmute you. And let's see. So Wendy, you left, but in case you're listening to the recording, she says, how can I help my kids recover from my past angry self? And I think that's going in and repairing, Wendy. Hopefully you'll get this, but really going back and being honest. I bet that when I got angry and I yelled at you like that, that was really scary for you. Going back and saying that I acted in that way and I didn't mean to, and this is how I'm going to change it. Being honest and authentic in your apology is the first step to helping your kids recover, because kids do recover and their brains change much faster than ours do. So repair is really important, validating their experience. Instead of just saying, oh, I got angry and we're going to get through it, validate what it might have been like for them and how very scary it might have been for them. Let's see. Katie's asking, is there research about teaching through love and collaborative problem solving? I can give you research, definitely. If you want to email me, Katie, you can email me at lori@teachthroughlove.com, and I can point you to some resources. I don't know them off the top of my head. If you want to grab Alfie Kohn's book, Unconditional Parenting. He has the mother load of resources in his index. He's got lots and lots of resources for this. And there are, I am not the only person doing this. There are so many people that have been doing this since even I was a child. And I'm sure many of you have run across them, but people that have children that are grown that are doing this. Dr. Laura from AHA Parenting, Patty Whippler from Hand in Hand Parenting has been doing this, I think, since the 70s. Dr. Gordon Neufeld and Dr. Gabor Mate wrote a book, and they have Transformational Parenting, I think, is their site, and they wrote a book on those resources. So yeah, there's lots and lots of research. Dr. John Gottman, Raising an Emotionally Intelligent Child, that's another one of my favorite resources that you can check out. So check those out. And if you want resources on mindfulness and how that really has been shown to reduce our stress, reduce our reactive responses, calm our minds, improve our immune function and mood, all of that, I will send you those resources as well. Let's see, Denise says, my girls are 2 and 5 and I'm worried I cannot change enough or fast enough. Denise, I want you to give yourself a big hug, and I'm doing that virtually. Actually, let me come on the camera again. Take a sip of water. Hi, Denise, if you're still here. Give yourself a big hug, girl. Excuse me, wait. I had to give myself some water there. You're doing just fine just where you are. Your kids are here with you to help you, to show you where you need to grow. And when they're 2 and 5, they're really reactive. So it might feel like you're not making those changes fast enough, good enough, well enough. You are. Every time you take a moment to step back and to step back and calm yourself so that you're not reactive. And again, if you blow up with your kids, I'm guilty of it. I've done it plenty of times. Go back and you repair and you validate what their experience was so that it doesn't become a stored negative emotional pattern. They had the chance to release it. So that's what we have to understand, is that these patterns don't get stored if we give our kids the opportunity to have their feelings heard and to express their disappointment, express their frustration, express the fact that it's unfair. Your child wants 2 cookies and he can't only have 1 cookie. It feels so unfair. Validate that instead of, you can only have 1, dinner's in 2 hours, dinner's in an hour, you know better, you only get 1, that's what we do every day after school. We have to forget all the logic with our kids and just stay emotional and know that when we stay connected to ourselves, when we meet our own needs, when we meet that self-care piece, you'll get better at it. You'll get better at it, and your kids will benefit no matter what age they are, whether they're 12, whether they're 4. They can benefit from this shift for you, absolutely. All right, Angie is saying, Angie, do you want to come online? Let me unmute you. I'm just going to read your question next. Actually, let me read the question, then I can unmute you. That might be faster than us explaining it. She says, I know each child is different, but how long do you think is an average time for an emotional outburst to last and for it to transition to more peaceful times? I know my behavior and how I really hear him and listen and validate, but she's wondering, okay, so you're wondering about what it takes, how long it takes. Every kid, like you said, is so different. My child could go through, when I've had to cut off the TV before. And when that's happened, there has been a time when that happened when she outright cried, thrashed, screamed. She went in her room to do it eventually because it was loud and she couldn't stay in the space, but she wanted space. She was older. She was probably 6. 35 minutes she went on screaming. And I just let her cry, let her have it. She didn't particularly need me. Now he's 4, he might be a little younger. Sometimes our kids want us to stay close, but normal is what's normal for your child. It's whatever happens to him. There is no normal. That's what we think. And here's the thing. If anybody didn't know, I grew up with undiagnosed Asperger's. It was undiagnosed because there was no Asperger's. But I found out at 37 that this was what I was dealing with, what all my social difficulties were, on my, expression of emotions that people didn't get. All of this stuff was that. But what that also gave me was a really highly reactive temperament. So someone like me, a kid that maybe is on the spectrum or has had some attachment difficulties, a child who's been adopted or foster care or had a really traumatic experience, they might go on for a little bit longer. A child that was adopted from an international adoption, something like that, a really traumatic experience, taken from the only home they know and then, you know, moved into somewhere else, they could rage for an hour, 2 hours until they completely fall asleep and wear themselves out. Most typical children are not going to do that. But so it's what's right for your child. It's when does it start interrupting your life? When is it not just, okay, this is a stage of development, but this is really interrupting. I see that this is not just him getting through it or having trouble, you know, getting through it. He eventually does, but he's actually not able to get through it until he wears himself out. So when kids are really little, 2, 3, they wear themselves out sometimes in the crying and they collapse and they stop. But if that progresses as the child gets older, that's when it becomes, okay, we have to look a little bit deeper. What could be stressing it out? Is there a food allergy that's interrupting behavior? Is there another, you know, a social situation, problem at school or with a teacher or with another peer that's causing this aggression and this meltdown? But at 4, I'm going to say it's just common. It's our ability to tolerate that frustration. And again, providing a space. We're not going to let a child tantrum in the middle of church. But we certainly can say, this isn't okay, we need to go outside and do it without blame and shame to help the child regulate. The same thing that we have to give that same compassion to ourselves. When we get upset, don't start judging yourself. Don't start the, oh, I wish I didn't, or what kind of mom am I, I'm so horrible. None of that. We got to let that go. Or breathe it in, and then release it. And you made a bad choice. And now you can be reflective because you're connected back to your thinking brain. Andrew's saying, because even when I validate his he still has strong emotions. Yes, because validation does not make the emotion go away. So if you guys I have a post on empathy. Do not give empathy to try and fix your child or to try to make your child's emotions go away. That's not what this is about. Listening and validation is not to stop it. It's giving the experience that the groove needs to make the path. Okay, so it's not about getting from point A to point B. When I validate and listen, my child does what I want. No, it's not when I validate and listen, my child stops expressing. No. When you validate and listen, it tells your child's brain that it's safe to have these feelings. And then when he knows it's safe to have feelings, he connects back to his thinking brain. He can connect to you eventually. Little kids, it takes a while. And then we can deliver the skill learning that we want, or make the reconnection that we need to, depending on what the conflict was around. So even though you validate strong emotion, even though you validate, yes, he's going to have strong emotions. In fact, some kids, when you start to validate their emotions, if they're used to you stopping them or trying to control behaviors, and or maybe you're punitive, if you then switch to validating emotions, they might cry harder for a time period because doesn't necessarily feel safe. What is this? What is she doing? She's going to listen to me? Is it really okay? And then it really comes out. And oh, thank God I can let this out. And they come out stronger and louder. So please don't validate emotions to change behavior. You validate emotions to give your child's brain the experience it needs to grow. And I know that you can't see it grow in the moment, but you are creating patterns and pathways. But he's 4. If he was 9 and you had been doing this all along and he was still having really long meltdowns where he couldn't get control, then I would say, yeah, we have to look a little bit deeper at what could be affecting, what could be going on. But at 4, it's really common. Let's see. Go to the next question over here because it just seems to be easier. I'm going to put everybody's hands down, and then if you really want to, instead of type your question, if you really want to share your question, go ahead and put your hand up again on the control panel, and I'll unmute you. We can talk to some people. But I've got a bunch of questions scrolling through here, so I wanted to answer a few more of these before we go off. Mona is saying, oh wait, let's see. Sorry guys, these are scrolling fast here. All right, Angie. So Anne is asking, I'm not a parent, I work with children, including my niece and nephews. What can I do about time frame expectations? This needs to happen in this amount of time. Well, it depends on the age of the child, and I think, and this is where we need to really take care of our own needs. So if we need to get out the door, say by 6 o'clock, or if lunchtime is happening in 15 minutes at noon, and we all need to be in our spot where we need to go, or we need to leave the house. There's a couple, young children can't be expected to keep up with our time. Children under 5, 6, they really can't be expected to even understand that. It's time to leave, you need to hurry up. That's just too much for them to handle. So we really need to be proactive, and that either means, sometimes we have to put a crying child in the car and validate and be okay that they're crying and they're upset and that they don't want to leave and go to the store, or they don't want to leave and do this task, whatever it is. And we take control of the situation by physically moving children. Sometimes we have to take them, out of the park and they're upset, and we take control of the situation. Or we're putting on their shoes, or we're taking the shoes in a bag and we're saying, okay, your shoes aren't on, but we're getting in the car anyway. I've done that with my 7-year-old, and the shoes get put on in the car, but it's because I don't make it about, you need to help me meet this expectation. So we really need to take, I think, control of our own time and our own needs. So if we have a need to be on time, we need to make sure that we are creating a situation where we're keeping up with that, and we're not expecting that responsibility to, we're not relying on our children to meet up with that, because it's just too difficult. But I think also there's things like visual guides and visual cues that you can use with children to help them transition and give them those timed cues to help move the day along or motivate them if you're working in a situation with children. And those are some tools that I have actually in other webinars that you can check out. So definitely do that if you have more questions on that. But I think we have to really be responsible for, that's where we have to adjust our expectations. Is this something that I need my child's participation, or is this something that I can do without them? And the teaching of things like, schedules and staying on time, that comes with lots of practice, and again, writing out maybe these having a transition board, or transition guides, cue cards for little kids that shows them pictures of what's going to happen next. And it doesn't mean that they're going to agree, but it means that we let them know the expectation, and then we shift them into what they need to do. Okay, we're going to be putting the blocks away. The blocks are over. There's no more time to play with blocks. And then the child gets upset. It's okay to be upset, and we still put the blocks away. But again, we don't have a lot of difficulty. Sometimes when we get a lot of resistance from children, it's because they don't feel safe, they don't feel connected, or often they're afraid. They can't understand that they have to do this when they feel this way, and they can't change the way they feel and able to make themselves do something. So that's why that process of listening and validating, you don't want to put those shoes on because those socks feel really icky right now on your, underneath, and they're curled up and they're making a rumple, and you don't like that. Right? It doesn't mean that we don't put the shoes on, but that we explore further the reasons of why our kids are resisting a particular. So there's lots of different reasons in each particular situation. But check out those other webinars for sure to find out more about those kinds of specifics. So JH, let's see, JH is raising their hand. Let's see if they put in a question. No, JH, I'm going to unmute you. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, what's your name?
Oh, perfect. I'm Jackie.
Hi, Jackie. Did you have a question?
Yes, I did. I wanted to know, I'm familiar with your work, and I'm a huge fan, of course, and I've definitely gotten much better over the time with, coping skills and being able to breathe, and most days they're such a great tool, and I'm able to, I guess, succeed would be the word, in staying connected regardless of, what's going on the outside.
Right.
And but yesterday, actually, I didn't sleep almost the entire night the night before because I was just feeling really sick, and so obviously pulling an all-nighter was not any sort of means of self-care. And then because I wasn't feeling well, I also couldn't eat. And so it's just, so not a great start to the day.
Yeah.
And my husband was late before work. He did everything he could to take care of her. But then when he was gone, I knew that it was going to be a hard day for me. And for the most part, she was, my daughter's 3, and for the most part, she was pretty, easy. But there were times where, I don't know how to explain this. Like, I wasn't able to get the space that I needed to do my normal like breathing, or well, it's almost like she picked up on my energy and it kind of made her go off balance.
Yeah.
And so we were both feeding each other negatively.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I told her, I said, you know, I know you really want me right now. My stomach just really hurts, and I need a minute so that I can breathe, so I can be more patient with you. And I don't know if that was just to abstract or what, but nothing I was saying, even as centered as I was trying to make myself, was really helping either of us. Mm-hmm. And she just kept clinging and wanting me more. But her touching me was physically painful yesterday, and so that was triggering me even more because I didn't feel well. I didn't want her on me, and so eventually it just kept getting worse. And then finally I was able to just make her lay in bed with me, and I said, can you just please lay down next to me and I can help you this way? And then it sort of worked, but most of the times that's not really an option to just lay in bed. But I was wondering if there's anything where that you can help me with in terms of coping when it's not that possible in terms of like their cooperation.
Yeah.
I don't even know if I'm thinking it right, but I hope you understand what I'm asking.
I do, but I think what you really need is just to know that it's okay to have that moment.
Okay.
Because you are, you know, your tolerance was depleted because you were sick and you didn't have a lot of sleep. So you can't grasp at, you know, straws at that point. You can really only do what you can, and you stayed as compassionate as you could. And if you didn't stay compassionate, you know, again, that repair, going back, would be the important part. But give yourself a break. Be okay that you were at your limit, that you had nothing left to give your 3-year-old at that point in time. I think that's okay to do. I mean, in terms of helping yourself, I mean, just staying connected to your breath. Just, you know, refocusing your mind on gratitude. Those are really hard things to do when you're stressed out, though, and when you're at that tolerance. You know, if you could reach those in those moments, then you would. You know the things to do because you've been following this. So giving yourself permission to be not at your best, to be not at top form, that is so, so important, you guys. I think that if we can let go of that, oh, I should have done it differently. Sometimes I have parents come to me and they just like you, Jackie, they give me this whole story and I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. Sounds like you handled that really, really well. And they're like, what? I did? No way. There's got to be it's that perception again. What were you needing in that moment? A lot of the times we can, you know, get in touch with stopping that sensation, that overwhelming emotion by just saying, what do I need right now? You needed peace, privacy. You needed to not be touched. Was that possible? Was it possible? No. But then you found a way. She'll lay down with me. That's the way. So no, that way wouldn't have been the way you would have done it in the supermarket if she was really upset. But creatively in that moment, you access the resources that you have, and the more that we practice this, the better you'll get. But give yourself permission to mess it up, to screw up, to get angry, to yell sometimes. Because when you give yourself that permission and then you're compassionate with yourself, the fact that you just weren't there, I didn't have it, and that was okay, then you show that model for your kids. That becomes, you know, I'm taking care of myself. I'm setting boundaries. This is my boundary. I can't have you touch me. Now, a 3-year-old, no, they're not going to understand that necessarily, and it might, you know, you saying you can't touch me and trying to be logical might actually just make her even want to touch you more, because all she hears is touch me, touch me, touch me, and not the don't kind of thing.
Right.
That's okay too. Does that help you? Because I don't want to just, you know, give you nothing, but maybe I want to make sure we got to the core of what you think you were really needing in that moment.
Right. Well, I think that makes sense, and in that situation, you know, it does. And I did apologize to her because, I mean, I didn't do anything like terrible, but I mean, I didn't yell, but I certainly lost my patience, you know, in my tone and my quick, you know, reaction, my biting, whatever. And so I apologized to her. But if I were feeling okay, and I was just having, you know, if I was if I had slept and I had eaten and all of those things, and she was doing something like that, I've noticed that there are times where she doesn't allow me to have the space that I need, and so I try to be creative. But sometimes I still like hit a wall, and I think, okay, how do I? Because sometimes I say I just need a minute so that I can, you know, resent her or whatever. And sometimes she's great with that, but sometimes she really doesn't want me to leave her. So I say, okay, I'll stay here, but if I stay here, I need you to be quiet. But then she won't. So if
So
I get that,
yeah, and that's where you want to stop talking to her and really go
okay.
inward, because that's where we start to go logical with our kids. Like, okay, I'm going to give you this emotional connection if you just do this. But at
Oh.
3, she's too little to process all that right now.
Mm.
She can't think. At 3, our brains wire up, crazy mess of connections, but really inefficient. So her ability to think about from your perspective and understand that if she just adapts her behavior in this way, that she'll get the connection that she wants, much too complex for her to understand at that point. So she's really just about, that's why little kids, they need that touch, they need that that soothing that comes through not just our words but through our connection, through the tone of our voice. Even just laying down and not saying anything might help her relax. Get down at your child's level, talk really slowly, but just stay emotional instead of logical. Again, just validate with her. And if you need to step out of the room because you're going to lose it, do that. I never want us to be, we have to be there for our kids a little bit more than, obviously, an older kid especially, or an adult. We need to be there for our kids. They need us to help them regulate, to not feel disconnected, all of those things, but never at the expense of our own sanity, of our own, unmanaged anger. If you're getting to that place, stop trying to convince her and simply walk out of the room. Give yourself that space to walk out of the room. And she'll cry, and maybe you can set it up so that she has supportive things, to keep her occupied. But as long as she's not unsafe, give yourself 10 seconds to go collect yourself so that you can come back in and try again. Sometimes it's just a constant stream of, I'm going to breathe through this, I'm going to breathe through this, when we're having that kind of a stressful day. And it's not, what can I, there's not one fix it. It's just, I'm going to keep breathing. I'm going to keep, we're having a bad day. Recognizing that, honoring that with our kids, saying, and she's little at 3, but even with older kids, you can say, okay, restart, everybody, let's reset. We are all feeling really amped up, a little bit negative, angry, whatever the feelings are. Let's take a deep breath, everybody, and just finish our morning. Let's just come back together and try not to fix anything. Try not to change anybody else. Just try to come back to that place of awareness. That's what the mindfulness is really about. You come back to awareness. It's going to help reset your brain and give you, then when you reset, you open up to your own, the possibilities that you didn't even realize were there. Like I was talking about earlier, I was trying to print something on the computer, and it didn't work, and I completely freaked out thinking it wasn't going to work at all. But as soon as I took that time to be mindful, to breathe, to step away, I realized I could go into the control panel, click repair on the program, and see if it worked, and it did, and it was soothed. But in that moment, I was not able to see that at all. It was my thinking brain was completely shut off. My perception was clouded with the fears of not being able to get it, not being able to print it out, not being able to do what I needed to do, all of these different things. And it's that story that makes us go, what do I do next? It's not working. This isn't working, and gets us all ramped up.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And I think you brought up a good point that if I do need to leave the room, I can set her up with, maybe Play-Doh or a sand thing or a sensory thing where I can feel confident that will help her self-soothe while I'm gone if I need to be.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes.
You're welcome. Thank you for asking that. Because I'm sure a lot of people are going through this. We all go through very, very similar challenges and similar experiences, like you say, So there's some reflection questions, you guys. I know that I didn't get to, see if I can answer if there's one more quick question. I know I didn't get to everybody's questions, but our brains will shut off after 90 minutes, so I don't want to give you too much information because we're heading into that 2-hour point. But I do these calls almost every month, and there's lots of opportunities. You can connect with me on Facebook. We have a great community, of course, that can support you in answering these questions. And the Teachable Moments, I do a new video every week, and they're organized by topic, so you can kind of check them out on YouTube and find what relates to you. So I'm sorry if I did not get to your questions here. Let me see if there's anything quick that we can answer, because some of these are really, really long. But hopefully you heard a lot of strategies and tools. Let's see, what's the best way to repair the situation after a bad reaction from a parent? Is apologizing enough, saying something like, what mommy did was not right, I've done this in the past and it doesn't seem like I'm getting through? Well, here's the thing. We want to go through, we want to give apologies. This is a great point, so thank you for bringing it up. That was from M. Angus. And this is a great thing to talk about, and we'll do it really quickly, because repair, we want repair to be about not going in to just apologize, but really to validate the child's experience. So when we apologize, it's sort of from our perspective. We want something. We want to show our children that we're sorry. We want to show them that we were wrong, that this was not acceptable. But instead, I want you to make repair about going in and just validating. Don't make excuses for your behavior. You don't have to say that I was mad and I did this. Just go in and validate their experience, that when I yelled at you to clean up your room in that tone and you ran, honor what happened. What happened? Did all the blood drain from your child's face? Did they scream back at you? Did they run away? Say, when I yelled at you and you screamed back, or when I yelled at you and you ran away, I bet that was really scary for you. Going in, drawing pictures. If you have little children, 2, 3, 4, sometimes they don't want to talk about the experience. So going in and drawing pictures. You can make a little book with the child that is just about the story of their pain, and stick figures. It can be really simple, a picture of you together and happy, and then a picture of you yelling at, maybe the video games not being shut off, whatever. Well, that's probably not for a little kid, but whatever it is that was upset you, and draw a really simple picture in your child's sad face and you with a mad face, and then turn it over and draw out the feelings that you were having too. Share your feelings. I'm not saying don't share your feelings, but really honor your child's experience and reconnect with them in ways that you think they need, instead of trying to give them what you think you want to give them. What is it that they really need? And it's simply validation. When you go in and yes, accepting responsibility, of course, but instead of, again, making excuses for what you did, and I was angry and I was tired and I shouldn't have done that, leave all that off. Your child knows that. Come in with what, and if you don't know, maybe you can ask your child. I'm wondering what that really felt like for you, because I'm thinking by your reaction that it didn't feel good, and I don't like leaving it there with you. It makes me feel concerned, and I don't want, going in with these honest reactions and feelings with your kids. And when you say you feel like it doesn't seem like you're getting through, sometimes connection and rebuilding, if you've been really angry, or if you've used a lot of anger and reactive habits with your kids, sometimes it takes time to build up that trust. And for kids, and they might test you. Older kids might scream louder at you, just like the little kids might offload those emotions to see if you're really going to handle all their pain and anger, if you're really able to tolerate it. Older children may scream back at you. No, you don't understand. You're not listening. Step back. Remove yourself from that. If you have to say, we can't talk about it like this right now, we're both really upset, let's come back together. Instead of, how dare you speak to me like that? I will not speak to you until you can speak to me with respect. Those kinds of things, because remember, that's what we're doing. That's shutting down that empathy. You guys, thank you so much for joining me here today for this webinar, Breaking the Anger Circle. These are just some reflection questions that I want to leave you with. And again, I will send you these slides, and we can connect again on another one if I did not get to your question, or post it on the Facebook page, because there are often people there that can support and give you the answers that you need, or have gone through that situation. And of course, in my monthly member support, we have that. And like I said, there's a 5-day no-risk trial. So if you guys are interested in getting some more support, you can check that program out. The links are there. You can just get it on my website. But these are some reflection questions for you to go back after you listen to this webinar again, or after you go through the activities. What is anger? What is my anger? Are you really aware of it? What are the effects? What have been the effects of that anger on my children and myself? Going through and recognizing, what, this behavior and my child may have been caused by this pattern of reacting that I had. It's really eye-opening to see how we're actually contributing to a lot of the negative interactions in our household and that anger circle. And to be able to break it, we need to be the ones that interrupt the pattern, because we have the bigger ability to do that. As adults, even if we're not really good at it yet, we do have the bigger ability to step in and break down that pattern. And I can assure you that you will see those changes if you take the time to be mindful and do that. And ask yourself, are my feelings valid? Are my feelings sending me excuse me, are my feelings sending me important, valid messages? It's really important to know that your feelings are guide points. And they're leading you to know what you like, what you don't like, what you want to change. And they're telling you a lot about your beliefs and your perceptions, your beliefs which are informing the way you see things, and that may need some changing. But until you get to the place where you recognize that your feelings are valid, it's going to be hard for you to have compassion for another person and to shift out of anger. Know what your tolerance level is. Where am I now? And what do I need to stay regulated and connected to my thinking brain? What helps me get regulated? Do those activities. Do young children have access to the thinking brain during strong emotions? No. I hope that that has been, that you've realized that children really don't have that ability. And we don't have that ability. When we get frustrated, you see how our thinking brain shuts down. So you can imagine how much a child loses their capabilities to respond with consideration, cooperation, the minute things don't go their way, because they need lots and lots of practice. How can I stay regulated? Know it for yourself. Where does anger show up in your body? Getting in touch with knowing your body cues is going to signal you so that you can actually stop yourself and put those mindfulness tools in place before you get to the reactive part, once you start recognizing those signals and those body sensations. And I have a couple of different YouTube videos on anger and recognizing those sensations, so you can check those out as well. What builds your ability to self-regulate? Self-care. Please take care of yourselves. Please get that support in your community, online, in a journal, wherever you can get it. Please take that time to have a place where you can speak about what's going on in your life without feeling judged, without feeling like someone's going to tell you how to do it better or how you should do it. Oh, your kids would just listen if you would do this. Find supportive people that will really validate your experience, and then when you are validated in your experience, you are able to open up your mind to seeing your own solutions and what works for you and your family. So remember to find that time for mindfulness. Where can I make time for mindfulness? What sensory experiences calm me down? And then put those things into practice, and I assure you that you will see the changes that you are looking for. All right, you guys, thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you enjoyed this. If you have questions, please feel free to email me, but I will send out the replay link as soon as it's available, along with these slides and exercises. Until next time, remember, it's about consciousness, not perfection. Take care, everybody. Thanks so much.